Picture a hallway. Two people walking, an ordinary afternoon, nothing on their minds. Somebody off to the side calls out a name. The young woman flicks her head toward the voice, her eyes land on whoever called, and her feet never miss a beat. She keeps right on walking. Now the older man, call him 72, hears the very same shout. But watch him closely. His head does not swing toward the voice on its own. Instead, his shoulders come around, and his hips come around, and his whole body pivots like one stiff plank of wood. And for about half a second, his foot comes down in the wrong place, and his hand darts out toward the wall. Nothing broke. Nobody fell. The moment passes, and he keeps walking. You would hardly notice it, but I want to give you a number that ought to make you sit up. When an older person falls while they are turning, they break a hip about 8 times more often than when they fall walking in a straight line. Think about how strange that is. Turning is a tiny sliver of all the steps a person takes in a day. You walk forward thousands of steps, and you turn only now and then. Yet that little sliver, that occasional twist of the body, grabs a wildly unfair share of the broken bones. So something is going on in that half second when the head turns. Something mechanical. Something wired down deep. And whatever it is not the same thing that happens when a fellow simply catches his toe on a curb and goes down. That is our puzzle. And I want to solve it the way you solve any good puzzle, which is to refuse to be satisfied with the easy answer. Because there is an easy answer, and everybody reaches for it. You ask why turning your head gets harder after 70, and people say, well, he is old, his muscles are weak, his reflexes are slow, he is just getting on in years. And they wave their hands, and that is that. Now, I am not going to tell you those people are foolish. Weak muscles are real. Slow reflexes are real. But as an explanation, that is garbage. That is not an answer, that is a shrug dressed up in a lab coat. It is like asking why the car won't start and being told, well, it's an old car. That tells you nothing. It doesn't tell you whether it's the battery or the spark plugs or the fuel line. If I say the muscles are weak, then I have to explain why straight walking, which uses those very same muscles, gives him no trouble at all, while a simple turn of the head nearly tips him over. Weak muscles don't know the difference between forward and sideways, so the lazy answer already fails its first test. Something specific about turning is going wrong, and I want to know exactly what. And this is worth chasing, because the stakes are not small. More than 1 in 4 adults over 65 falls every single year. In the United States, that is roughly 14 million people, every year hitting the ground. About 37% of those falls cause an injury that needs a doctor or forces the person to stop what they were doing, which comes out to something like 9 million injuries a year. Falls are the #1 cause of injury, fatal and non-fatal both, among older people. So this is not a curiosity. This is one of the great quiet dangers of growing old, and it is hiding inside something as innocent as turning to see who called your name. Now, to crack a puzzle like this, you need the right tools. And I want to tell you a story about how I got mine, because it is going to turn out to matter more than you would guess. It was the year 1946. I was at Cornell, and honestly, I was burned out. I had been working hard on serious things, and I had lost the fun of it. I was sitting in the cafeteria feeling sorry for myself when some fellow fooling around tossed a dinner plate up in the air. And as it went up, it wobbled. Now the Cornell plates had a little medallion, a red seal printed on them. And I watched that seal go around, and I watched the plate wobble, and I noticed something. The seal was spinning faster than the plate was wobbling. The two rates were different. And when the wobble was small, the medallion went around about twice for every 1 wobble. 2 to 1. Now nobody asked me to figure this out. It was completely useless. But I thought, that is a funny ratio, 2 to 1. I wonder where that comes from. So I started playing with the equations of motion for a spinning, wobbling object, just for the fun of it, just to see if I could get that 2 to 1 to fall out. And it did. The physics worked out, and there was that factor of 2 sitting right there in the mathematics. And that was so satisfying that I kept playing. And the play led me to think about how electrons spin and wobble, and that led me straight into the work on light and electrons that I am probably best known for, the work that shared the Nobel Prize in 1965. All of it, from a plate some clown threw in the cafeteria. So when I tell you that the physics of a spinning, turning, wobbling object is worth understanding, believe me, I have a personal stake in it. So let us get the tools. And I promise to keep them simple, because you only need a few, and they are the same few whether you are talking about a dinner plate, a spinning wheel, or a 72-year-old man in a hallway. The first idea is torque. Torque is just a twist. When you want to make something turn, a doorknob, a wrench, a merry-go-round, you don't just push it, you push it off to the side, and that sideways push that makes things rotate, that is torque. No twist, no turn. If you want to start something spinning or stop it or change which way it is pointing, you have to apply a torque. That is the price of admission for any change in rotation. The second idea is angular momentum. Now that is a fancy phrase, but all it means is the amount of turning a thing has got going. A heavy wheel spinning fast has a lot of it. A light one spinning slow has a little. And here is the crucial part, the part that makes rotation so sneaky and so different from ordinary motion. Angular momentum is not just a number, it points in a direction. A spinning thing has an axis, a line it turns around, and the angular momentum points along that axis. So it is not enough to say how much spin there is. You have to say which way the spin axis is aimed. And to change where that axis points, to swing it from aiming one way to aiming another, you again need a torque, and you need it applied in just the right direction. Point it wrong and the thing goes somewhere you did not expect. And that brings me to the strangest, most wonderful piece of the whole business, which is what a spinning thing does when you try to tip it. Take a child's top, or better, a spinning bicycle wheel held out on a little axle. It is spinning fast, and you hold one end and let go of the other. Now gravity is pulling down on it. You would swear it should just fall over, flop down like a dead thing. It does not. Instead, the whole axle begins to travel slowly around in a horizontal circle. It does not fall. It goes around. We call that precession, and the first time you feel it in your own hands, it feels like magic, like the wheel is disobeying gravity out of pure stubbornness. But it is not magic, it is angular momentum being honest. I once put it this way, and I will say it again because it is the heart of the thing. It has to go down a little in order to go around. The spinning wheel does dip just a tiny bit, and that little dip gives it exactly the small new piece of angular momentum pointed straight down that it needs in order to swing its axis around in that horizontal circle. The downward tug of gravity does not knock it over. Gravity's twist gets turned sideways into that patient circular march. Every bit of it obeys the bookkeeping. To reorient a spinning body, you must feed it the right torque in the right direction at the right moment. Get the coordination right, and the thing turns smoothly and stays up. Get it wrong, and it topples. Now hold on to that sentence because we are going to need it. To turn a spinning, moving body without it falling over, you have to manage its angular momentum in a coordinated way. You cannot just shove. You have to feed in the right twists in the right order. That is true for the bicycle wheel. It is true for the wobbling plate. And I am going to show you that it is true in a way that is going to surprise you for a human being walking down a hallway who hears somebody call their name. Because here is the thing I have not told you yet, the clue that turns this from a medical story into a physics story. There is a gyroscope inside your head, a real one. Not a metaphor, a piece of working hardware sitting in the bone behind your ear, and it has been keeping you upright your whole life without once asking your permission. And when we go looking for why turning gets dangerous after 70, that little gyroscope is where the investigation is going to lead us first. So let us go and find it. Reach up and touch the bone just behind your ear. Right in there, buried in the hardest bone in your body, sit 3 little loops, 3 tiny curved tubes filled with fluid, and they are arranged so that each one points along a different direction in space. One catches the nod of yes, one catches the shake of no, one catches the tilt of your head toward your shoulder. 3 tubes, 3 axes, and between them they can pick up a turn of your head no matter which way it swings. That is not an accident of biology. That is engineering. If you wanted to build a machine to measure rotation in 3 dimensions, you would build exactly this. 3 sensors set at angles to each other, each one reading its own piece of the twist. And how does a loop of fluid feel a rotation? Think about carrying a mug of coffee and stopping suddenly. The coffee keeps going. It sloshes up the far wall of the mug because the liquid does not want to change what it was doing. That laziness, that stubbornness of matter has a name. It is inertia. Now turn your head quickly to the left. The bony tube whips around with your skull, but the fluid inside lags behind for just an instant, exactly like the coffee. And sitting in that tube is a little gate covered in fine hairs, and the lagging fluid pushes on the gate, and the hairs bend, and the bending fires a nerve. The faster you turn, the harder the push, the bigger the signal. Your head has built itself a rotation meter out of a puddle and some hairs. It is the same physics as the sloshing mug, shrunk down and wired straight into your brain. Now watch what that little meter does for you, because this is the part that ought to knock you flat. Fix your eyes on one word here, some fixed point, and shake your head no, back and forth, fairly fast. The word stays sharp. It does not blur, it does not smear, it sits there perfectly still while your skull is rattling around it. Now hold your head still and shake this page back and forth at the same speed instead. Now it blurs. You cannot read it. Same relative motion between eye and target both times, but one is crisp and one is mush. Why? Because when you shake your head, those 3 little loops catch the turn and fire a signal, and that signal races to your eye muscles and rolls your eyes the opposite way, exactly as fast as your head is going, so your gaze stays nailed to the target. When you shake the page, there is no head turn, so there is no signal, so your eyes do not get the memo. That reflex has a name, the vestibular ocular reflex, but never mind the name. What matters is the speed. It is faster than thought, it is faster than seeing. Light hits your eye, your brain takes about 1/5 of a second to really make sense of it, and that is far too slow to keep your vision steady while you walk. So evolution did not route it through the slow machinery of looking at all. It ran a private wire straight from the gyroscope in your ear to the muscles of your eye, and it stabilizes your gaze before you even know your head has moved. It is a gyroscope steering a camera. And you have been carrying it around, using it every single second, and most of you never knew it was there. So now we have a suspect. We have a beautiful little rotation sensing gyroscope in the head, and the crime is that turning the head goes wrong after 70. The detective in me says, well, obviously, go check the hardware. Go see if the gyroscope is broken. And when you go and look, oh, it looks like an open and shut case. People have taken the temporal bones, that hard bone behind the ear, from people who have died at every age, and they have counted the hair cells in those loops under a microscope. And the count goes down. Steadily, year after year, roughly in a straight line as you age, the hairs are lost. And here is the cruel part. In your ear, in your brain, those hair cells do not come back. You do not grow new ones. A cut on your hand heals. These do not. Every one you lose for good. And the loops, the semicircular canals, the very ones that sense turning, they lose their hairs faster than the parts that sense straight line motion and gravity. It is the rotation sensor specifically that is decaying quickest. By the time people are in their 70s, something like 69 out of 100 show measurable trouble in that system. By the 80s, it is up around 85 out of 100. And if you look just at the turning canals, the numbers are worse still. 80 to 90 out of 100 past 70 showing some fault in the very hardware that feels a head turn. So there it is. Case closed. The gyroscope wears out, so turning the head goes bad. Sign the confession and let us all go home. Except that a confession that easy should make you suspicious. Because if a worn-out gyroscope were the whole story, the trouble would creep in slowly and steadily, a little each year in a straight line, right alongside those hairs falling out one by one. A slow, smooth slide from your 20s onward. But that is not what people report. Nobody says the head turn got a tiny bit worse every birthday since college. They say it was fine and fine and fine, and then somewhere past 70 it fell off a shelf. The hardware decays in a straight line. The trouble arrives like a cliff. Those two shapes do not match. And when the timing of the crime does not match the timing of your prime suspect, a good detective does not sign the confession. He keeps the hair cells on the list, sure. They are guilty of something. But he goes back out into the rain to find who else was in the room. So we go and look at the wiring instead of the sensor. We go and measure that eye reflex, the private wire from ear to eye, and we ask how well does it hold your gaze steady, and does that change with age? And now we get our plot twist. That reflex, the strength of it, the gain, is remarkably stubborn. From your mid-20s all the way to about 79, it barely budges. It holds. Decade after decade, the eye keeps tracking, the gaze stays locked, the reflex does its quiet job and does not complain. And then, right around 80, it drops. Not a gentle slope. A fall. After that age, it sheds strength at a real clip, and by past 80 a person is something like 8 times more likely to have a reflex too weak to keep the world steady during a quick turn than someone younger. There is your cliff. There is the shape that actually matches what people feel. The sensor was fading the whole time, quietly, but the reflex it drives held the line for 50 years and then let go. And when that reflex lets go, here is what it feels like from the inside, though the person almost never has words for it. They turn their head to look at who called their name, and for a fraction of a second, the whole world smears. The gaze does not stay locked, so the scene slides. And the eyes have to jump, catch up, jump again, hunting for the target the reflex used to hand them for free. Now put that person in the middle of a stride. Their weight is already up on one foot, already tipping forward, already committed. And right at that instant the visual world jumps sideways on them. The one clean signal they were leaning on, the steady picture, betrays them for half a second. That is a terrible moment to be told a lie by your own eyes. But even that, even the smearing reflex is not the last piece. Because I have been talking as if all your body has to do is sense the turn. It also has to make the turn, and to make it well your brain has to know at every instant exactly how far your head has already rotated on your neck. And that knowledge does not come from the eyes or the ears. It comes from the neck itself. Buried in the muscles and joints of your neck are little strain gauges, sensors that report the angle, that whisper to the brain, the head is now 40 degrees around, now 45, now 50. You never hear that whisper consciously, but your brain is listening the whole time, and it uses that number to place your head in space. Here is a test you can do tonight, and it is a good one, because it isolates exactly this sense and nothing else. Sit in a chair. Close your eyes so the ears and the vision are out of the game, and only the neck is talking. Now, with your eyes shut, turn your head to where you believe 45 degrees is, halfway to your shoulder, and hold it there. Then open your eyes and see how close you got. A young person nails it, off by maybe 2 degrees, a hair. Now the same test in people past 65, and the miss nearly triples. 4 degrees, 4.5 degrees wrong, and confidently so. The neck's own sense of where the head is pointing has gone soft and imprecise. And it gets worse, because the raw arc the neck can even travel through shrinks too, something like 3 to 5 degrees lost per decade of grown-up life, so the older head not only misjudges its angle, it has less room to swing in the first place. The gyroscope is fading, the reflex has fallen off its cliff, and now the neck itself has both a smaller range and a blurred sense of where it is inside that range. 3 clues. 3 suspects, each one real, each one guilty of something, and yet not one of them, standing alone, explains the stumble in the hallway. And that is exactly where every good investigation gets interesting. Because the answer is not going to be any single broken part. The answer is going to be about what happens when a body that can no longer trust any one of its instruments decides all on its own to change its whole strategy for turning. So here is what the body does. It stops arguing with itself. Faced with 3 instruments it can no longer quite believe, the older nervous system makes a decision that is frankly rather clever and also rather dangerous. It quits turning in pieces. It starts turning all at once. Let me tell you what that means, because it is the whole answer, and it has been hiding in plain sight the entire time. When you are young and someone calls your name, watch what happens in slow motion. Your eyes go first. Then your head swings, leading the way, and it gets there and stops. A beat later, the shoulders and chest follow the head around. A beat after that, the hips come along, and last of all, the feet repoint down the new direction. Head, then trunk, then pelvis. A little cascade, a wave traveling down through you, each part rotating on its own schedule, borrowing torque from the part above it. The head is the scout. It goes ahead and looks, and the rest of the body trusts the scout and follows. Now that little cascade is not decoration. It is exactly the coordinated management of angular momentum I was drawing on the board with the wobbling plate. Each segment can spin a bit and then hand its rotation down the line so that at no single instant is the whole heavy mass of you swinging around at once. You spread the turn out in time. You keep your center of gravity tucked neatly over your feet because the parts that are rotating are small and light and quick, and the big heavy pelvis waits its turn. The old body cannot afford the scout anymore. The gyroscope in the ear is faint. The reflex that reads it has slipped off its cliff. The neck has a short throw and a fuzzy sense of where it is. So sending the head out ahead, alone, into a fast independent swing is now the single most alarming thing you could ask the body to do. Because for that fraction of a second the head is reporting motion the ear cannot measure and the eyes cannot stabilize. And the brain gets a smear where it used to get a clean signal. And the brain, quite sensibly, refuses. It clamps the neck. It locks the head to the shoulders to the hips, and it turns the whole tower of you as one stiff block. The scouts call this turning en bloc, in a block, and once you know to look for it, you will see it everywhere. The grandparent who does not just turn a head at the dinner table, but rotates the entire upper body like a statue on a lazy Susan. That is not stubbornness. That is a nervous system protecting itself from instruments it no longer trusts. And here is the trap, the thing the detective has been circling toward. Turning as one rigid block is safe for the senses and terrible for the balance. When the researchers cued older people to snap their heads around while walking, the head motions came out slower and smaller than in the young, and, more tellingly, that stiff head threw off the delicate timing between the trunk and the pelvis. The very coordination that keeps walking smooth. When you turn en bloc, you lose the forward drive of the step and you get pushed sideways, out over the edge of your own foot, because now the whole mass swings together and its momentum has nowhere clever to go. The body that's stiffened up to feel safe has, in the very same motion, made itself more likely to topple sideways. It takes extra little shuffling steps to catch up with a turn a young person finishes in one clean pivot. The safe strategy and the dangerous outcome are the same strategy. That is the cruelty of it. No single broken part did this. Not the hair cells, not the reflex, not the neck. Each was a real suspect. Each was guilty of something, and the crime itself was committed by the plan they forced the body to adopt. The stumble in the hallway is not a failure of one instrument. It is a whole orchestra deciding, reasonably, to stop playing in sequence and instead hit every note at once, and calling that music. Now let me tell you why I have spent all this time on what looks like a small thing, a head turning on a sidewalk. Because of what it costs. When older people fall, an enormous share of the worst falls, the ones that break a hip, do not happen while walking in a straight line. They happen while turning. A fall during a turn produces something like 8 times as many hip fractures as a fall during ordinary straight walking. 8 times. Turning is a tiny slice of all the steps a person takes in a day, and yet it is where the real danger concentrates, because turning is precisely the maneuver that leans on every instrument we have watched fail. And you can see it coming if you know where to look. In one careful study, they strapped sensors onto 160 older people, average age near 80, and let them walk around their own lives for the better part of a week, and they recorded every single turn those people made. More than 700,000 turns. And when they went back and asked who among them went on to fall again and again, the recurrent fallers were not marked by anything dramatic. They simply turned a little less often. They took a little longer to get through each turn, roughly 1 9/10 of a second, where the steadier people took about 1 7/10. And from one turn to the next, they were less consistent, less able to make the same turn the same way twice. The body that has lost its cascade has also lost its repeatability. It has to solve the turn fresh each time, and sometimes it solves it wrong. This is not a rare affliction of the unlucky few. More than 1 in 4 adults past 65 falls in a given year, something like 14 million people, and better than a third of those falls do real harm, and falling is the leading cause of injury, fatal and otherwise, in that whole population. Behind that mountain of numbers is, over and over, the same small physics. A head that will not lead, a body that turns in one frightened block, a center of gravity that swings out past the feet. I find something almost beautiful in it, and I mean that in the way a physicist means it, which is not always comforting. The very same law that makes the spinning plate wobble twice as fast as it turns, the same conservation of angular momentum that forces the gyroscope to dip down a little in order to go around, is the law your inner ear was built to measure and your neck was built to obey. For most of a life, the machinery reads that law so smoothly you never once feel it working. You turn to a voice, and it is nothing. Then, slowly, the little gyroscope in the skull runs quiet, the reflex slips, the neck forgets its angles, and the body, to keep from lying to itself, stops turning like a wave and starts turning like a stone. So the next time you see someone stiffen and swing their whole self around just to look beside them, do not think old and do not think weak. Think of a spinning wheel that has to tip a little in order to turn at all, and understand that you are watching a body still obeying the same law it always did, only now with the instruments turned low, doing the honest, careful, dangerous best it can.